Prologue explored the hidden world of the human mind and uncovered the strange behaviors hidden deep inside us. Chapter 1. Dissociative Identity Disorder. How many souls can one body hold? People often say that love has no boundaries of gender, race, or even species. In a way, the same can be said for the alternate identities found in dissociative identity disorder. A person might have both a sweet, gentle little girl and a powerful adult man living inside the same body, with the male identity acting as her protector. Someone else might have both an owner and a pet as separate identities. One moment they behave like a normal person. The next, they truly believe they are a big, fluffy dog. When was the first time you ever heard the term multiple personality disorder? For me, it was while watching Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 classic Psycho. After that, more and more movies explored the same idea. Films like Identity, Fight Club, and Shutter Island introduced millions of people to this fascinating psychological phenomenon while delivering unforgettable twists. Today, the condition is officially known as Dissociative Identity Disorder, or DID. The name itself paints a clear picture. It's as if a person becomes so divided that they no longer recognize who they really are. People sometimes joke with their partners by asking, "Do you love my body, or do you love my soul?" When it comes to DID, that question isn't entirely a joke. You can think of it as several different souls sharing the same body. Each identity takes turns controlling it. The body is simply your physical appearance, the person you see every time you look into a mirror. The soul is everything that makes you uniquely you. It's the way you speak, the tone of your voice, your habits, your posture, the little behaviors that people instantly recognize as yours. For example, imagine your family is waiting for you to come home. They hear footsteps coming down the hallway. Most of the time, they don't even need to look. Just by the rhythm and sound of those footsteps, they know it's you. That unique way you walk is part of your soul. In other words, your soul is your presence, your personality. The way you speak, the way you treat people. It's everything that makes people say, "I'd recognize you anywhere." Since dissociative identity disorder is commonly shortened to DID, we'll simply call the man in this story D. D was a 27-year-old black man. He suffered from severe headaches. They came twice a day, and each attack lasted for hours. The pain was unbearable. But what was even stranger was that every time the headaches ended, he couldn't remember anything he had done during them. One day, after another night of unbearable pain, D finally checked himself into the hospital. Most people assumed he simply couldn't take the headaches anymore. That was only part of the reason. The real reason was much more terrifying. He had learned what he'd been doing during those blackout episodes. The stories left him horrified. So what exactly had he done? During one episode, he got into a violent fight with another man and even tried to stab him to death. Before he could finish the attack, the police arrived. As he fled the scene, an officer shot him in the left leg. On another occasion, he chased his wife and their 3-year-old daughter around the house with a large kitchen knife. Another time, he tried to drown a man in a river. During the struggle, however, he slipped into the water himself. Somehow, he managed to swim nearly a quarter of a mile upstream before making it home. The next morning, he woke up completely soaked but had no idea why. Checking into the hospital turned out to be the smartest decision of his life. From that point on, every headache and everything he did while suffering one would be carefully monitored by doctors and nurses. It didn't take long before the medical staff noticed something extraordinary. Whenever D had one of his headaches, he introduced himself by different names. His voice changed. His behavior changed. His personality changed. It was as if an entirely different person had taken over. After weeks of observation and careful analysis, the team reached an astonishing conclusion. D wasn't alone inside his own mind. There were 3 additional identities. They named them Little D, Middle D, and Big D. Little D was calm, polite, intelligent, and always in control of himself. Middle D was a hopeless flirt. Whenever he saw an attractive woman, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Big D was the complete opposite. Violent, ruthless, dangerous. The saddest part was that the real D had absolutely no idea the other 3 even existed. 4 different identities were trapped inside one body, each fighting to take control. A team of psychologists spent countless hours studying D. Eventually, they traced the origin of each alternate identity. Little D first appeared when D was 6 years old. That was the day he watched his mother stab his father. Middle D emerged after another childhood experience. D's mother sometimes dressed him like a little girl. During one of those moments, Middle D quietly came into existence. Big D appeared when D was 10 years old. He had been brutally beaten by a group of older white teenagers. At that very moment, Big D was born. His purpose was simple: to protect D. Take a moment to compare each personality with the event that created it. Their personalities perfectly reflect the trauma that brought them into existence. If the connection isn't obvious yet, don't worry. We'll come back to it shortly. Let's keep going. The 4D brothers continued fighting for control of the same body, each trying to push the others aside. Whenever Big D took over, trouble wasn't far behind. He was the one who picked fights with strangers. He was also the one who chased D's wife and young daughter around the house with a kitchen knife. What about Middle D? The moment he spotted an attractive woman, he completely lost his focus. Like a bee drawn to flowers, he couldn't stop hovering around her, flirting shamelessly and refusing to leave her side. Little D was the most likable of the three. Calm, thoughtful, and highly disciplined, he would occasionally appear while D was working, helping him stay focused and perform at his best. We've talked about all three alternate identities. But what about the real D? What kind of person was he? To answer that, we need to understand the difference between a core identity and an alternate identity. The core identity is the person's original self, the one they were born with. For D, that's simply D himself. The other three personalities develop later in life, making them alternate identities. In many cases, the core identity tends to be passive, dependent, burdened by guilt, and prone to depression. Otherwise, there would be little reason for the mind to create other identities to take over. That tells us something important about D. Physically, he was probably a big, muscular man. After all, whenever Big D was in control, he could overpower people in fights. The body itself was strong, but D could only use that strength after Big D took over. As the original D, he was timid. He avoided confrontation. He backed away from conflict. He was easily frightened. He might have looked intimidating on the outside, but deep down he lacked confidence. When life became overwhelming, all he really wanted was to run away, hide somewhere no one could find him, and quietly break down in tears. But that's not the whole story. Alternate identities can also be hostile, controlling, and even more dominant than the core identity. In some cases, one powerful alter becomes the manager of the entire system. It decides who gets control of the body, how long they stay in control, and under what circumstances they appear. So who was really running the show inside D? Some people would probably guess Big D. After all, he was the one making all the headlines. He fought people. He threatened his family. He seemed to be the most powerful personality. But that's not actually the case. The one in control was still D. Why? Because the personality that controls the schedule controls the system. Notice something interesting. The other three identities only appeared when D was suffering from unbearable headaches. In other words, D only handed over control when he was in extreme physical distress. It's almost as if he was saying, "I'm miserable right now. You deal with this mess whether the others wanted to or not." They had no choice. Viewed from that perspective, D may have been far more calculating than he first appeared. Now let's put all the pieces together. On the surface, D seemed like an ordinary man, perhaps even a tough one. But underneath, he lacked the courage to act on his anger. He dreamed of being powerful, but couldn't face reality. He secretly wished he could strike back at the world. Yet when real conflict arrived, he shrank away. That contradiction makes him both frustrating and strangely sympathetic. D insisted that he had no idea the other three identities existed. But does that mean Little D, Middle D, and Big D were equally unaware of him? Not necessarily. In many cases of D, the core identity knows nothing about the alternate identities. The reverse, however, isn't always true. Some alternate identities are fully aware of the core personality and quietly observe everything from the background. It's almost as if D was standing under the spotlight while his three brothers watch from the shadows. At this point, one question naturally comes to mind. Movies like Psycho and Shutter Island featured only the personalities. Fight Club centered on two identities as well. The three faces of Eve portrayed three. D already had four. So what's the actual limit? How many identities can one person develop? Psychologists have an answer. Clinical studies suggest that a person with dissociative identity disorder may develop as many as 13 to 15 distinct identities, and those identities aren't limited by gender, race, or even species. One person might have both a young woman and a strong adult man living inside the same body, with the man acting as the woman's protector. Another might alternate between being a human and believing they're a large, fluffy dog. Movies often make these personality switches look mysterious and impossible to notice. Real life isn't very different. The change can happen in an instant. 1 second, it's one personality. The next second, someone entirely different is in control. The transformation can be so sudden that it feels like watching a lightning-fast costume change. Even more surprisingly, physical characteristics can change as well. One study found that about 37% of patients switched their dominant hand when a different identity took over, suddenly becoming left-handed or right-handed. Some people even lost physical symptoms. For example, a person with a lazy eye might show perfectly normal vision under another identity. So what triggers these personality switches? Almost anything. Sometimes all it takes is seeing something completely ordinary like an orange. The trigger can be that simple. We all know that emotional struggles like sadness, anxiety, or stress sometimes fade with time. Those are emotional problems, not necessarily mental disorders. True psychiatric disorders are very different. Most do not simply disappear on their own. Dissociative identity disorder is one of them. Without proper treatment, it usually lasts a lifetime. In fact, moving into a completely new environment can sometimes lead a person with it to develop even more identities. That raises another question. If it is so difficult to treat, could someone without the disorder successfully pretend to have it? It's a fascinating question. And the answer comes from one of the most famous criminal cases in modern forensic psychology. Let's go back to the movie Identity for a moment. In many ways, it works almost like a crash course on dissociative identity disorder. One of the film's key scenes shows legal officials arguing with psychologists over whether the main character should be held criminally responsible. The prosecution raises an important question. What if he's only pretending to have it? At the time, some legal systems allowed defendants with severe mental disorders to avoid criminal responsibility under certain circumstances. The psychologist strongly disagreed. To support his argument, he handed the court the suspect's journal. Inside were entries written in completely different handwriting, with different writing styles, tones, and personalities. After reading it, even the prosecutors hesitated. If you've seen the movie, you probably remember what happened next. If you haven't, it's worth watching for yourself. Now let's look at a real case. A case that asks the same question. Can someone fake dissociative identity disorder? This is the story of the Hillside Strangler. In the late 1970s, a man named Kenneth Bianchi, whom we'll simply call K, raped and murdered 10 young women around Los Angeles. He dumped their naked bodies on remote hillsides, giving rise to the nickname the Hillside Strangler. The evidence against K was overwhelming, yet he never stopped insisting he was innocent. He cried. He denied everything. He acted as though he had no memory of the crimes. His behavior eventually convinced some mental health professionals that he might actually suffer from dissociative identity disorder. Sensing an opportunity, K's attorney brought in a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist hypnotized K and asked, "May I speak to another part of you?" Almost immediately, another personality appeared. "My name is S," it said. "I've been waiting for you, yes. I'm the one who committed those murders. K knows nothing about them. He's completely innocent." To K and his lawyer, the defense seemed airtight. They believed they had found the perfect escape. What they didn't expect was the prosecution's next move. They called in Dr. Merlin Orne, one of the world's leading experts in clinical psychology, psychiatry, hypnosis, and dissociative identity disorder. If anyone could tell whether K was genuine or faking it, it was Dr. Orne. The battle of minds began. Dr. Orne's first strategy was subtle. During one interview, he casually remarked that people with genuine did usually have at least 3 distinct personalities. Not long afterward, another author suddenly appeared. This one called itself S2. It looked suspiciously convenient. His second strategy was psychological pressure. One day, Dr. Orne asked K for an entire day of testing. Hour after hour, he subjected K to an extensive battery of psychological assessments. By the end of the day, the results were clear. K's responses differed dramatically from those of real dead patients. Finally came the decisive blow. Dr. Orn asked investigators to search K's home. They found numerous textbooks on psychopathology and mental illness. It appeared K had spent considerable time studying psychiatric disorders. Then investigators interviewed his friends and relatives. Every single one said the same thing. Before his arrest, K had never shown any signs of dissociative identity disorder or any other serious mental illness. After those 3 steps, K's defense completely collapsed. Dr. Orn reached a straightforward conclusion. K had been faking dissociative identity disorder. Based largely on that testimony, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. There's actually a much simpler way to tell the difference. People who are pretending usually go out of their way to display their symptoms. Real patients often do the exact opposite. They try to hide them. Dissociative identity disorder and schizophrenia share certain features, but they are 2 completely different psychiatric disorders. The simplest way to understand the difference is this. It involves one body with multiple identities. Schizophrenia involves one body with one identity. Both disorders can involve hearing voices, but the source of those voices is different. People with DID usually experience the voices as conversations happening inside their own minds, between different identities. People with schizophrenia typically believe the voices come from outside themselves, as though someone else is speaking to them. Another important difference is insight. Many people with DID recognize that these voices originate within themselves and often try to suppress them. People with schizophrenia generally believe the voices are real, even though no external speaker exists. Now it's time for another famous case. This one changed the history of psychology. It's known as the case of Anna O. Anna O. played a pivotal role in the development of psychoanalysis and modern psychotherapy. Her case inspired psychologists to seriously explore the unconscious mind for the first time. Because of that, she is often considered the first patient in the history of psychoanalysis. Whenever people hear the word unconscious, one name usually comes to mind: Sigmund Freud. Freud's theory of the unconscious transformed psychology. He believed the human mind has 2 levels, the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Imagine an enormous iceberg floating in the ocean. Only a small portion rises above the surface. That visible tip represents conscious awareness. The massive section hidden beneath the water represents the unconscious. Most of our thoughts, memories, fears, desires, and emotional conflicts remain buried there, shaping our behavior without us ever realizing it. In Freud's view, the unconscious isn't just another part of the mind. It's the force quietly running almost everything.